This is KHOI 89.1 Story City Ames, and you're listening to I Am Able Iowa, where we discuss the ability and disability. I'm Nancy Baker Curtis, public school teacher, board president for the ARC of Iowa, and parent advocate. I will be your host for today, and I'm joined by my co-host, Zach Meekum from Allies in Advocacy. Today's guest is Jessi Murphy. Jessi is a public school teacher, parent advocate of a child with special needs, and a caregiver. Jessi has a real desire to see more inclusive and sensory-friendly spaces in her community. Jessi, welcome to I Am Able Iowa.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're so happy to have you be here. Jessi, can you kick it off with sharing a little bit about your family and kind of what led you into advocacy for the things that you care about, more inclusive and sensory-friendly spaces in your community?
Sure. So I'm Jessi. I have an 11-year-old son, Andrew. He has intellectual disabilities and seizures, and we also navigate mixed expressive receptive language disorder. His journey started at 9 months, but I would say as far as advocating for more things to benefit him, probably started about a year and a half ago. And I just really felt frustrated and exhausted by the fact that there weren't enough programs, there's not enough services, there's just not enough opportunities that worked for our family. And so I really began to dig in about that time. And this last year, I had the honor of participating in the Iowa Family Leadership Training Institute, and that really kind of helped propel me into advocacy.
That's really cool. I do have a couple of questions just for our audience members. First and foremost, you mentioned the diagnosis, mixed regressive. Yes.
Mixed expressive receptive language disorder. So he has a fairly good understanding. He can receive what we're saying. His ability to then express his responses or what he wants or needs is something that he does struggle with. He does have a limited vocabulary, but then he uses a communication device most of the time to kind of interact with people.
Right. So, in layman's terms, auditory input is there, and then he struggles a little bit sometimes with the output.
Yes.
And then the other question I had is you mentioned the family leadership.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to us?
Sure. It's a program through the University of Iowa, and it's usually a cohort of about 12 or so family leaders, and they're all family members who then have a disability or a person with a disability in their family. And the whole point of this training is to then help them learn to be more confident advocators and then kind of gently force them to advocate. We have to walk away with a project plan and an action to make that happen.
That's really awesome. I love that it's they give you something tangible. It's not just theoretical. It's like, no, now you have to go do this.
Yes. A little bit of pressure, but all with good intentions.
And so what was your project?
Mine was adaptive 4-H program. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And what's so cool, Zach, is that this Iowa Family Leadership Training Institute is a program that I have also participated in. Okay. It's a program that Julie Beckett, one of the former board members for the ARC of Iowa and longtime advocate with the Developmental Disabilities Council and the Iowa Family Leadership Training Program and the LEND program, she would come to and speak at every single cohort. And really, the focus was on what's something within your sphere, your community sphere of influence that you can change, and then really challenge you to come up with your elevator pitch, bring your project to fruition by having some sort of event or doing some sort of advocacy. And storytelling is obviously, I know, a passion of yours, Zach. There's a huge storytelling component for this. And so it really is about crafting the next generation of family advocates and helping self-advocates to better find their voice. And I identify with Jessi on so many levels because my Charlie also has mixed expressive receptive language disorder. And so we're also a talker family. And when you have a kid who understands, maybe can't do a lot of multi-step directions, right? But has good receptive understanding and just can't produce. It's like the world is passing them by, right? And the world is so fast and so dynamic. I'm thinking about in whether it's school or you're just out in the community. And so it really connects with me on so many levels why, Jessi, you would pick more inclusive, sensory friendly opportunities as kind of your lens and focus for your project.
Yep. Yep.
So obviously being, it's like I'm talking to myself sometimes, I feel like, Jessi, because you're also a public school teacher, right? And so there's this unique intersectionality that comes with being an educator and educating kids in your classroom that have diverse learning needs, and then also being a parent. Can you talk a little bit about what that journey's been like for you?
Yeah. It's been really eye-opening. I mean, I knew as a seventh grader I wanted to be a teacher. I had a vision of what that looked like. You know, you go through your training program and you get to school and you're doing your thing, and then you become a parent. So yeah, a lot of things changed for me at that point. But being an educator definitely has made me, in some ways, a more confident parent for my child. That certainly doesn't mean it's been easy and I haven't struggled, but I do know that I have extra people I can connect to, people I can ask questions and insight, get recommendations from, and that's been so powerful for me, especially as a single parent. And then in addition, I know that I'm a better teacher because I'm a special needs mom. I can better keep an eye out for kids who might need some extra support that aren't already receiving it. Or when I meet with families and hear their struggles, I might have some resources in my back pocket that the rest of the people at the table might not be aware of. So I definitely feel like while it's not easy to do both, definitely, I have things to offer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I have training as a teacher, and I taught very briefly and then quit. Um, but a question that I have for you is, as a teacher who now has a special needs child, um, a child with a disability, have you um, sought out opportunities, like as a teacher, to like help empower kids with disabilities?
You know, I definitely have a lot more. I've always been comfortable having one-on-one conversations with anybody who would need it, or need an extra, you know, a push or a vote of encouragement. But I'm definitely quicker to do that with those who struggle, and definitely quicker to reach out with suggestions, or I'm constantly thinking of things outside of the school day to how to better serve or meet someone's needs. And yeah, so I would say yes.
Yeah, and you also just have more empathy for that, right?
Absolutely.
The thing that frustrated me for the time that I was in the public school system is the teachers that would kind of be like, "Not my problem. I'm not qualified. I don't want to do that. I that's not my job," right? And as a mom, you want your son to have the best education possible,
Yeah.
right? So
I think too, even, you know, as a teacher, you sit on one side of the table when there's IEP meetings or parent meetings. And then I remember the first few times, and even still, when I sit on the table, opposite side of the table as a parent, it's hard. It's super stressful. It's super emotional. You're trusting people with your child, especially one who can't always communicate. And so, yeah, that empathy piece extends into the parents as well. I just feel like, again, that's something I can offer that not everybody else is able to offer.
yeah.
And I think,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that also it helps you as an educator foster relationships between peers in the classroom, right? So much, right? Because you can model empathy and understanding for your students. And I think about, you're also in the middle school age.
Yep.
And I think about how crucial that is for young people at that time of their life.
Yep.
Modeling what it looks like to apologize or how to take responsibility when you make a mistake, and just how powerful that modeling and learning can be for them. And then how that really does ultimately do what Zach asked about, empower students, right?
Yep.
Empower students to be upstanders instead of bystanders, right?
Mm-hmm. I could even, if you don't mind me sharing a couple examples, we had a young lady a few years ago. She's wheelchair bound and she's very much nonverbal. And I didn't know that she also, for like her fitness time of the day, had a walker that could get her to stand up and propel herself. When she made a pit stop at our room one day because they knew I was fond of her, and I just almost started sobbing. And so, we all said hi to her and told her good job, good work. And you could tell that even after that, the kids went out of their way to interact with her a little bit more in passing time and at lunch. I had another young man who was practically legally blind, and he could keep up with classwork, but cognitively he wasn't quite where his peers were. But we were reading some short stories in class, so I had him come sit next to me so he could see the pictures and read. And so then I would engage him in whispering and tell little jokes, and I said, but don't tell anybody. And then we'd turn and face everybody. And so he's giggling, and the class is just eating that up because they can see, like you said, fostering the relationship there, and then they modeled it later. So I think it's so powerful to have children like ours in the classroom.
I agree with you so much. And I think what you're modeling, and this is something that I know that Zach, you'll hone in on this, is using that age appropriate language and age appropriate voice with them, right? These are middle schoolers, not children. You don't need to duck down to talk to them. Zach, I see you shaking your head here.
Yeah, and I think there's like this interesting line that like every educator has to walk of like you need to meet your students where they're at,
Sure.
right? And you have to help them along the way in their journey of learning. And there's like also you don't want to single a kid out that's disabled because they're disabled.
Right.
And you want their peers to treat them like peers.
Yes.
And to be able to walk that line is not easy because there's no blueprint, right? Like,
Yeah. Well said.
And just how important it is to educate about those things. I remember being in one of my classes, and we do a lot of games because it's vocabulary, it's Spanish, right? And so there's a lot of games. And I remember I had made an accommodation, but I just decided to go ahead and implement that accommodation for everyone. They had to roll dice, and I knew the fine motor component of that would be hard. And so I'd put the dice in a little container so you could just pick up a box instead of a tiny little cube, right? And it was much easier, and the kids just loved popping it. But this one young man, and it's very much the age of eighth and ninth graders, right? Just every time he would just not put the dice close enough to his peer he was playing with, who happened to be in a wheelchair and not have the best range of motion. And so finally, I had to say to him, I need you to place the die closer to your partner because it's hard for them to participate when you keep not putting it far enough. And you could see the horror on the student's face, but then it was followed also by like relief,
Yeah.
right? That somebody had handled it for them and just kind of, and then I just moved on. And after that, that student never did that again. But they just needed to be directly told, right? And
right.
sometimes that's what needs to happen is you just need to tell them like it is. This is what they need. And I don't think it's unexpected to ask an adult to step in that situation. As a young person, I don't think we can expect young disabled people to be autonomous self-advocates yet, right?
And I think you can expect most young middle schoolers to be oblivious to an extent, right? They're middle schoolers. Um, they're learning and they're developing that awareness. But like, yeah, those prompts are going to be necessary.
I'm recording. It's okay.
So I'm just really curious. So we're going to go into National Caregivers Month, right? The show will air at the beginning of November. And
Mhm.
so I'm really interested. You mentioned you're a single parent and now you're a teacher. So caregiving is just a part of who you are. But what
Yeah.
does caregiving mean to you?
I try not to get emotional, I guess. Caregiving just means I'm on all the time. My child does have a desire to be independent, but he has limited independent skills. He's an 11-year-old in body, but he's much younger, cognitively. He can't do the everyday things that 11-year-old can by themselves. He can't go to the bathroom by himself. He can't shower by himself. He can't even turn his iPad on by himself. So it's just constantly mama, mama, mama. So yeah, it's exhausting, and some days are harder than others. And truthfully, it can be quite lonely. But at the same time, it is so rewarding in a lot of ways because I get to experience things that other parents don't get to experience, whether it's the delayed milestones. I remember, I think Andrew was 8 years old before he first verbally said his version of I love you. And that was such a pivotal moment for us. And that's special. And at the same time, I read a book. It's called Caregiving with Grit and Grace by Jess Ronnie. And I kind of had the same sentiments she had before I read the book, but it really validated that the work that we do as caregivers is essentially holy work. We are the ones washing feet, so to speak. And there's just something very humbling about that. So it's hard, but I love it.
And
As
so
a
go ahead. I'm sorry.
as a single mom and also a teacher,
Yeah.
like in order to have the bandwidth to like maintain all of these caregiving relationships, I'm just curious, how do you fill up your cup? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So a combination of things. I definitely try to make sure I have me time in the morning. And so I'm usually awake from 3 to 4 in the morning. Try to get a couple hours to myself before he wakes up. And then obviously sometimes, I've got to do some schoolwork or I've got to do some medical paperwork for him. If I get the chance, I'm trying to get a workout in. Audiobooks, honestly, audiobooks and podcasts are the things that keep me sane. It's the extra adult voice that I get to have a conversation with, theoretically speaking, throughout the day. So that's really huge. And then I have family that they live an hour away, but we have a group chat that we do pretty often. That was one great thing that came out of COVID. So just, sending jokes, sending questions, checking in, FaceTiming my mom. And so Andrew gets to see grandma a lot. So those few things are what really keep me going.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Well, and I think what you've really tapped into, Zach, in your question is that the unspoken load that comes from being a teacher, that comes from being the parent of a disabled child, and the decision making fatigue, right? At the end of the day, I can't answer another question. I can't explain the directions again.
Yeah.
Don't ask me what's for dinner because I don't have a clue. Because if I didn't plan it over the weekend, I can't do it during the week because I'm just full. And
Yeah.
I assume that you get that way too, Jessi.
Oh my gosh. And even just talking about the food prep, I mean, I grew up canning food and freezing meals as a farm family. I do that religiously in the summertime. Every Saturday and Sunday, I meal prep. So we have all our lunches packed for the week. Breakfast is going to be a repetitious thing for the week, and dinner, I have a few options. And otherwise, yeah, we would be a hot mess every day, all the time, because we get hangry fast at home. So just the food component alone is exhausting. But yeah, there's definitely things you have to do to maintain.
And so having a whole month that's dedicated to this idea of recognizing caregiving, this was something that we, as caregivers, a lot of us were advocating for in the infrastructure package, to have paid caregivers, and just to have that kind of more formalized recognition of that load because it is another full-time job.
Yeah.
What does it mean to have a whole month dedicated to families like ours?
It's a bit overwhelming, I guess, in a good way. I can appreciate that people are actually aware of our family situation and our struggles. Um, and at the same time, I don't want their pity. I want their help. I
Mm.
want their grace and understanding. And obviously, I'd love for others to join us in advocating for more change and more support. That's what I
I,
would love.
I love that you said that because a question that I wanted to ask as a person with a disability, right? There were times when, like, people would say things like, "Oh, your mom is so wonderful and such a saint," and it's like, yeah, you're right, but I don't like that you said it like that.
Right.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I wonder as a mom that wants your child to also be like seen as a full human being
Yeah.
worthy of respect and love. Like, how do you articulate that tension? Yes.
Yeah. I usually just try to give the spin of, we can do the same things you guys do as everybody else. It just looks a little different, and we might need a little more time.
Yeah.
And it might be kind of messy for that matter. And it often is. So, again, as much as I want them to have grace with us, I also have to be prepared to give it in return, or maybe initially rather, and just kind of educate as much as we need to advocate.
Yeah.
And don't you feel like so much of advocacy is bridging that knowing doing gap, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when people know better and they hear that personal story, they oftentimes immediately are so willing to help and to do better. It's
Yes.
just there is this gap between understanding the problem and then how do we implement a solution that's reasonable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be the benefit of other people, right?
Yes. Yep.
And I see that so many times, whether we're talking about sensory friendly time at the fair or, a height adjustable adult size changing table. These are things that places are willing to do once they understand why the need is so important, right?
Right.
And so I'm thinking about this, inclusivity and schools, and we've talked a little bit about that. But can you just share to us a little bit? I know you've been working really hard on this adaptive 4-H program, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it really speaks to your desire to create a more inclusive community in the community where you live. So, can you talk to us a little bit more about your project for the IFLTI or the Family Leadership Training?
Yeah. So are you wanting to know how I first came up with the idea and then kind of
Yeah.
sure, whatever. Um, I grew up participating in 4-H. I liked a lot of things that 4-H had to offer. And most of the time people think 4-H, oh, that's livestock, that's animals. I don't have animals, I can't do 4-H. And no, it's not. I grew up on a farm and I didn't show any animals. I did what's called static projects. And so we did food, gardening, sewing, all kinds of things. And in recognizing my child loves to be in the kitchen, he loves to help mama stir things, cut things, make a mess, all the things that the kitchen entails. So it's like, okay, this could be an opportunity for us to engage with community, an extra intentional activity for us to share in. So about, 2 years ago now, I approached the extension office, said I was interested, said my child had special needs. They had a one-on-one meeting with me to kind of set up like a modified IEP, if you will, and put some things in place, assigned us to a club here locally, and we went to a meeting. And I learned really quickly that it was not an environment that we were going to be successful in. It was way too formal. It just felt like, for someone who moves around, I call Andrew my 10-second Tom, because if we're not doing something different every 10 seconds, he's already gone and doing something else. And it just wasn't going to work.
Mm.
So we didn't go to any more meetings. We thought we'd try county fair. We had a few ideas in place to try to make that a successful experience, but it still wasn't enough. He and I both left in tears. And so I spent the next week kind of again processing, how can we make this different? And I didn't have the answer at that point. But at the same time, the extension office was willing to have conversations with me. So then fast forward a little bit, a few months later, I joined IFLTI, and then it just really kind of formulated into this is what I want to pursue. And it's just been progress ever since. So that's how it came to be. As far as what it looks like, right now, for the most part, it's just a monthly meeting. We have kids come in, we have stations set up so they can kind of move around and pick the ones they want to do, stay there longer if they want to, or bounce to the next one, or maybe come back if they like one. Every meeting has a theme. And so we're trying to teach kids something new that they might not know how to do, whether like next month we're going to do some adaptive woodworking and they're going to make wooden porcupines. And gosh, we have sewing coming up and we have a guest speaker coming to help us with that. And we're going to do some horticulture over the later months. We're going to have some animals come in. So again, it's really just kind of a flexible environment with different topics, all hands-on projects, hopefully building some confidence and some new relationships. And we've had a few people who are current 4-H members in a typical 4-H club who've shown interest in volunteering with us. So that'll be, again, another opportunity, right, to teach and to model and to engage. And that's really what we're looking forward to doing as well. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing.
I love that. You're connecting with me on so many levels. We often want to do something kind of like a play date, but
Yes.
because play has to be facilitated play, that becomes very challenging as the kids get older. And so it seems like this is kind of like Boy Scouts Light or Girl Scouts Light, right?
Sure.
And it just never occurred to me that you could do that with 4-H. So it just seems like such a great fit for having this opportunity to acquire skills, right? Have some of that supported community living kind of structure built in where you're out and you're doing something outside in your community.
Yep.
I love this project and I think it's so interesting, Jessi.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of big ideas, so we're just getting started.
So as we think about, this idea of inclusion, it seems like this kind of stemmed from a lot of different things, but some of it seems like it stemmed like from your experiences as a teacher, right? Seeing that maybe the traditional club that is a school-based club isn't necessarily appropriate for what it is that you're looking for. How do you, as a teacher, not necessarily thinking of your current district, but just in general, speaking in general terms, how do you think public schools are succeeding or struggling with inclusion for students like our kids?
Yeah, that's tricky. That's tricky. I think, as you said, I think there's a lot of good intentions when people know what to do. I think there's also times where in some schools where they don't know what to do. They don't have the staff to do it. They don't have maybe the right person in charge to do it. And they might be overwhelmed by the population that they're trying to serve. But I do know that there are a lot of great schools that are unified schools, for example, and offer all things that tie in with that unified experience, right, of merging, blending neurotypical and neurodivergent kids together. And they are just thriving. But not every school has had that opportunity to do that yet, or maybe had the seed planted or the right leadership to make it happen. So I do think that in general, and I'm going to err on the side of good, that people are doing the best that they can, and they too need more help to make things better for all the kids that, are like ours.
I appreciate your optimism.
I have to be optimistic, otherwise I don't know what I would do.
Glad I always am glad that other people are. But a question that I have is like, what do you think are some low hanging fruit that could like make the public school system a little more inclusive tomorrow?
Something simple, and we only recently started that here at our district would be, and they call it different things at different schools. There's programs called, I think it's a buddy to buddy, peer to peer. And again, it's really intentionally coaching neurotypical children how to engage with and then support your neurodivergent children, no matter what the level of ability is with that neurodivergent child. I think that is so profound and something simple because it doesn't cost anything to do that. You don't need extra bodies in the room to do that. It just takes a little bit of coaching to make the magic happen. I think that would be the best first step for any district.
I agree. I think the Best Buddies program, or whatever your district calls it, is amazing. We just participated in an event this past weekend that was a Best Buddies sponsored event in our community. Um, and I think that those skills those students acquire do transfer out into the real world, because I happened to find myself at our local Walmart one day, and wouldn't you know, somebody had parked in the diagonal loading zone lines. And so I was by myself with Charlie and could not put him in the van.
Yeah.
And I was standing there and I was like, God, I just need someone to help me. And lo and behold, one of the students who's involved in Best Buddies just happened to be walking by and said, do you need help? Do you want me to stand with him while you back your van out of the your parking space so you can put the ramp down in the parking space, because you can't put it down in the loading zone because somebody has parked in the loading zone. And I'm sure we can all go pet peeve on that, but it just shows like that's a real world application, right? And it comes from having that greater awareness of others. And that's something that we want all people to have. And I don't think it could be ever any more important than it is right now.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, if there's one thing that I could just change around about the world at large, it's just I would want more people to just see outside of themselves.
Yeah.
And programs like the Best Buddies, I think really does force you to see outside of yourself. And over time, that can become a muscle.
Yeah.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to I Am Able Iowa, and we're talking with Jessi Murphy. Jessi is a public school teacher, a parent advocate for a child with a disability, and she's also a caregiver. Jessi has a real strong desire to see more inclusive and sensory-friendly spaces in her community, and we are just so honored to have her on the show as our guest today. I love this conversation that we're having, and I love how we're just kind of all over the place, because I do feel like schools, communities, schools are the place that get you ready to go out into the world. And so whether it's these low-cost programs like Best Buddies that really are just about building relationships and practicing those soft skills, or you can have some more you may have to put some more expenses into it for something like, say, a unified district, right? Where you actually need to have maybe some program oversight or specialized curriculum. But one of the things that kind of perked my ears, Jessi, when you talked was leadership, right? And so often what drives these decisions, or what really inspires people to do these sorts of things and take these chances, has to do with the leadership at the top. So I'm just kind of curious, who is that leader for you in your community? Who is that person who's kind of inspired you to follow in the footsteps of giants?
Yeah, that's a great question. My mom and my grandma both are people that I have always admired for their desire to serve others. We did a lot growing up with the church and with mission work. And, gosh, I'll never forget the Salvation Army. We did so much with the Salvation Army, and just the importance and how it just always strikes a chord for me. Anything Salvation Army related for that matter. But, I spent so much time there boxing food at Thanksgiving time. I worked with their children's program for a number of years. I got married in the Salvation Army because that idea of serving other people just really resonates with me. Not that they had experience with special needs folks. My child is kind of the first real experience for my family, but again, it just feels like a natural direction for me. I have been given these skills. Now I have a situation. I know what to do. So I'm very grateful for that.
And leading by example, right?
Absolutely.
Because we can all talk about how we want things, and talk is important, right? We need to have dialogue. That's why we're on this show, is to elevate voices and conversations, right? Amplify messages. But then there is doing, and there's those who speak about doing, and then those who actually speak about it and then go out and do. And I think that that's really what you've kind of tapped into here, right? Because you knew you had this idea. You knew there was a need for something greater in your community, an adaptive 4-H club, but you weren't necessarily sure how to go about putting that desire into fruition. And it just so happened the IFLTI, the Family Leadership Program, came, that, again, intersectionality, right?
Yep.
And with that intersectionality also comes opportunity. And it sounds like you found some real partners with the extension service there in Lynn County. So if anyone's sitting there listening and they're wondering, I just don't think I could do that. She has these skills that I don't have. What would you tell those people?
I didn't pursue this with the idea that I wanted to be the club leader. I can tell you that part. Anybody can do this, right? If you have a desire, if you have a need, if your child needs something different or more, you have it within you to make that happen, no matter what it is, whether it's 4-H or not 4-H. And all you got to do is start asking, because if you don't ask for help, if you don't ask people if they're willing to create a new program or try a new approach, the answer is always going to be no. So you have the power to make things happen. That's all. I mean, what more can you say?
And at least you know you tried, right?
Absolutely.
Question that I have for you, because you spoke a lot about service.
Sure.
And it really sounds to me like you have a servant's heart. Um, a drum that I will bang all day, every day for the rest of my life is that everybody, regardless of ability, has something to offer and a way that they can serve. And so I just want to know, your son, how does he, how does your relationship with him serve you, right? Serve your family, serve people at large.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that modeling piece, right? I am humbled every day by the way that he needs me, and the fact that even though it's hard some days and some days I just want to cry, it still is very fulfilling. And so in modeling that for other people, it spreads, right? And then they can pay it forward. And sometimes it's then them stepping in to do for him when I don't have the capacity to do it as well. And so giving other people opportunities to serve when I can't. So it always comes full circle. And it's such a powerful place to be in.
Humbling, right?
Yeah.
And also, I think you have to be vulnerable sometimes, right? And for some of us who are type A moms, right, who've got to-do lists that have to-do lists that have to-do lists that we're checking off both in our head and on our large, oversized Post-its with our flare pins.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think it's hard sometimes to really be vulnerable or to ask for help or to say, I just don't know if I can do that, because no is not in our vocabulary, right? And if plan A isn't going to work, well, we're a teacher and we're a medically complex child's mom. We've got a plan B, C, D, E, and F, right?
Yep.
Because we are expecting for something to go wrong. And Zach, while we're positive people, we're also realists with a dose of cynicism, right? To know enough to have multiple backup plans. And so I think that there's really, that part of it too, right? You know you're strong, right? How many more times do you have to prove you're strong?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think what you have to do is just let your guard down and say, right, I'm also vulnerable or I'm needing assistance. Could you please help me?
Right. One as a disabled person, and I'm sure it's the same for you too as parents of disabled children, of like, I've never had the luxury of believing in the lie of independence, right? Is like, is like we live, it's very common in Western society, right? This independent individualism that is kind of preached at us. It's false, right? And you're a 4-H person, 90% of people have no idea where their food comes from. No, nobody is independent.
Yeah.
And the sooner you accept that, the easier it becomes to kind of let that go and say, okay, I have things to offer,
Yeah.
but also I need to let people help me.
Yeah. It's hard to do, but yes.
And I think that perspective, right? That's the thing I often tell my students is I have this superpower that you can never give away from me. And it's not just that I'm incredibly patient. It's that I have this perspective and I happen to know how absolutely fragile all of this is, right? I know how quickly all of this can turn on a dime. And so this moment where you're not listening to me and you're all climbing the walls because it's a full moon, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so I think that that perspective is the thing that we're always trying to share, right?
Mm-hmm.
And help others see that our worlds, they do intersect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our worlds are so much bigger than just us. And once we start caring for one another and having these sorts of very poignant conversations, well, then we can actually start to do things, right? Have more inclusive spaces, have activities that better meet the needs of the families and the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest, though, inhibitors to so much of this is just resources, emotional resources, logistical resources,
Mm-hmm.
financial resources. What do you wish caregivers had more access to in terms of resources?
Oh boy. I guess honestly, it would just have to start with awareness. I just wish it was more commonly understood, all the things that we are, even like you said, mentally preparing our day. When we go out and do anything, we have to pack a diaper bag, we have to pack 1,000 extra snacks, we have to pack extra clothes, activities, maybe the iPad, those rescue meds. That's just to go for a short outing, right? Um, I can't even tell you how many times we've backed out of attempting to go into a store because it's like you can tell with the blink of an eye, oh, you child are not in a place that's ready, right? And even if we do make it into the store, people don't know what to do when they see an 11-year-old having a toddler-like meltdown, right? Or how to engage. Or if he's constantly trying to engage with them, they don't know how to do it in a way that they're comfortable with and that he would understand. So it's just, again, awareness about all of those things would make life so much easier for everybody. And aside from that, gosh, I mean, we could talk about how I wish there were more funds to pay for respite care providers. I wish there was more access to childcare that specialized in working with special needs children. That is a huge gap. Family therapists that, have a background in understanding the struggles of a special needs family. I mean, all of those things are missing right now. Right now, for my family, even like we're talking about music therapy. So insurance will not pay for music therapy. They do not recognize that as a therapy service. So we either pay out of pocket or we use respite care funds to help pay for it so that we can keep going. Well, now that we're finally a part of the ARC family, our respite funds are going pretty much towards going to the ARC. So now we're back to okay, we have this grant, the Children at Home grant, that kind of pays for at least part of the year for music therapy. But now we need to decide, do we keep going to music therapy and pay out of pocket? Or do we use respite funds? And then now my one respite care provider who lives over an hour away might not get paid for all the times that they are able to provide respite care. So, I mean, take it for what that is. I mean, do we need a better, coverage by insurance? Absolutely. Do we need more funding there to cover respite in general? Absolutely. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things that I wish were made more available to our families. Sorry, end tangent.
No, I really appreciate you breaking all of that down, because I think a lot of people really just don't understand how lacking the support is
Yeah.
for individuals with all kinds of disabilities. All of those services that you mentioned, most of them fall under the umbrella of home and community-based
Mm-hmm.
services, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those, because of Medicaid cuts, may get cut even more instead of being increased like
Yeah.
they need to be. And so a lot of people have no idea.
Well, those are the ones that are not federally mandated, right? Only
Correct.
institutionalized care is federally mandated. Home and community-based services are well recognized as being more cost effective, right? Offering better outcomes for the individuals utilizing those services. They're just not, they don't have to be paid for. They are optional or entitled, however the current buzzword is for that. But for all of us, they're the things that we live and die by, and the sun rises and sets by every single day. The one you said, Jessi, that resonates with me powerfully is childcare,
Yeah.
right? Because your son and my son both utilize incontinence products, they cannot be serviced in a traditional daycare setting. However, they may not be medically complex enough to utilize a medical daycare setting that is offered perhaps like through a clinical setting or a hospital. So we are fortunate that in the state of Iowa, there is a program called Medical Daycare in the Home, and we utilize this program. Um, However, it is a home and community-based service, and we know that Medicaid is projected to have, I think, what was it, $70 million shortfall next year.
Yeah.
And that's not
And it
even
was already
including,
cut 32 million prior. So
right? And that doesn't include any of the budget cuts that happened as a result of the big, beautiful bill. That's
precisely.
just the state of Iowa's budget shortfall.
Yeah.
And so that's obviously something that I'm sure for you as a teacher has to be incredibly concerning, because aren't there days that you have to report to school and then your son doesn't have school?
Yep. Yep. And conferences. I mean, we had conferences last week, and obviously I'm expected to be at school after hours. My mom, and we did some coordinating ahead of time to make sure that it worked. My mom is our respite care provider, but she was wanting to go on this vacation, as she's entitled to do. So I asked Andrew's dad if he would come spend the week with Andrew so that I could do that. And it worked out fine. But yeah, there's definitely times. I remember, gosh, it must have been a year or two ago. We had a full day of PD right after winter break. I must have asked 5 or 6 different people if they could hang out with Andrew, even part of the day. And finally, someone had to take a day off of their job so that I could go do my job. And it is an issue. And even with the ARC, and I'm so grateful for the ARC, we don't live in town where the ARC is located, and they operate by that school district's schedule. So they don't have early outs the same day that we do, or school breaks always the same time we do. And even if they did, that's still 25 minutes away. I got to be able to get him there and then get back to my job in a timely fashion. So yeah, it presents all kinds of issues.
And this is something that for me, I'm incredibly passionate about as a teacher, because the other thing we have in Iowa, besides underfunding of services for people with disabilities, is a teacher shortage.
Sure.
Right? We are
Yep.
experiencing a massive teacher shortage, and we do not have people that are coming in that want to serve as teachers. I see this in my role on the school board. The applicant, it's not a pool, it's a puddle, right? And when you don't have a lot of high quality applicants to choose from, you're not necessarily getting the best quality staff. You may not end up retaining that staff. And when you have high turnover rates, that impacts the quality of the education of the students in the classroom. You've been teaching for a while now, right?
Yeah, this is my 17th, 18th year in the classroom.
Yeah. So you're definitely experienced, right?
Yep.
You've had an observation or two.
Yes.
You've gone through all the professional development. You're highly qualified. Would it be fair to say that without the Medicaid support services your family receives, you would not be able to maintain your job?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even before my mom became our primary respite care provider, I still had to find somebody who could watch Andrew on those days. And we did have a different respite care provider for a short time. I don't know what I would do. I honestly don't know what I would do if I didn't have that service. And even still, even the summertime job or the summertime camp opportunity, this last summer, Andrew getting to go do that was the first real break I've had in 5 years. Right. And so even though I had the summer off and I know we're talking about teaching responsibilities, it was game changing for both of us. Sure.
Talk about that. Why was it game changing?
Well, I'm sure you can relate to Nancy, trying to find, as we keep talking about, opportunities to entertain and engage and that are meaningful to our children other than the iPad or the TV for an entire day by yourself, right, is exhausting, especially since there aren't a lot of opportunities. And I don't know about Charlie, but Andrew, because of his seizure meds, his body can't regulate temperature. So we can't always be outside when it's super, super hot. So where do we go that's inside that works for him, right? That is something he wants to do. Going to a movie theater, that didn't really happen for him until a year ago for the first time. And even still, it's not a perfect experience. So we got to keep working on it. But there's just not a lot of things for us to do. So it gave him an opportunity to meet new people, engage with new friends, go experience things that I'm not able to do with him by myself. And it gave me a chance to just kind of breathe and decompress a little bit. I'll be completely honest. And it was an emotional summer for me because I think it was finally having that chance to then just be vulnerable with my situation and people and process a lot of things. So thank you, ARC.
Yeah. Well, and the importance of respite care, just in general, is like absolutely vital for anybody that does 24-hour care, right?
Yep.
We're like, it's a job. It's difficult, and nobody can be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah. You
Well,
crash and burn at some point.
Well, and just reflecting back about some of the things that you said, Jessi, you get up at 3 something in the morning so you can find personal time. But your personal time is grading papers, filling out medical forms, approving hours in the portal, right? So your idea of downtime, I'm sorry to break it to you, Jessi, it might be a little skewed.
I'm not saying it's necessarily my idea of downtime. It's just those are the things I do when it's just me because I have to get it done at some point.
And I understand what you meant by it. And I was just doing a little teasing. But I also think it's really important. And this is, I think, what Zach was speaking to. You have to have some time and some space for yourself. And it can't just be when you're trying to go to the bathroom or take a shower, right? It's actually the amount of time to let your shoulders down and to breathe a little deeper, to do something like read a real book instead of just listening to an audiobook because you love the feel and the turn of the pages. And so often those simple things are just such a luxury. And the need during the summer is not less, it's more.
Absolutely.
because there's no school there. And I think that this is also true after you age out of school, right? And the inclusive employment opportunities for people with disabilities after they leave, and the community-based opportunities for people with disabilities after you're done with your programs, if they continue past the traditional, 18-year-old or graduation.
Yeah. And that even being said, I mean, with our 4-H open house, we had one family with an adult child show up and ask if they can engage too. And my heart says yes, but protocol is, right, you have to be a school age child. So we're talking about, I don't know how far we'll get. I would love to offer the same program and experience to adult special needs children in addition to what we're doing. I'm sure we'll have to jump through some hoops and figure some things out. But man, you're exactly right. Because if we think it's hard for our school age kids to find things to do, I recognize that it's also harder for those who are just out of school too. So we have work to do.
Right. Well, we also have work to do amongst like the advocacy community, right? Because like what you're doing is you're making space for other people with disabilities and their parents, right? And like, I'm sure, wouldn't it be nice if more people were making space for you and your child as well?
Absolutely.
So if you could speak to your community leaders, the people in charge at the state capitol, the policymakers, the superintendents, the head of the extension office, and you had the opportunity to speak to them about caregiving and inclusion, what would you want them to know?
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. How do you even make that a succinct answer? Honestly, it would just be, you mentioned a lot of different people there. The phrase that always comes to mind when you talk about policymakers for me is that whole catchphrase of nothing about us without us, right? And all of those categories of people you just mentioned, anytime there's a conversation about anything, you need to invite us to the table, and then you need to listen, right? We should not have to fight so hard to access services, get some financial support, or supports in general, or just to even be included. It is not hard to add even just an hour to a program, for example, before or after it starts or ends. It is not hard to turn the music down. It is not hard, Nancy, like you would say, to put a height adjustable table in a bathroom so someone doesn't have to lay on the floor. It is not hard to put a handicap button outside a building to make it easier for them to come in and out. Right? There are a whole bunch of little things that everybody can do. And honestly, it comes down to raising a child, special needs or otherwise, right? It takes a village, and we need everybody to be a part of our village.
Thank you so much for being a part of the show today, Jessi. I think that this was an amazing conversation, and I think it just highlights so much about the real life of a typical Iowa family. So thank you for being here. This is Kate. Oh, we'll have you back. This is KHOI, Story City, Ames, and you've been listening to I Am Able Iowa. I Am Able Iowa airs the first and last Saturday of morning of each month at 9 a.m. on KHOI 89.1 FM. You can also hear us streaming live online at khoifm.org. We invite you to share your comments, questions, and program ideas with us at doug@thearcofiowa.org. And if you visit www.thearcofiowa.org, you'll find previous episodes and more information about our program. I Am Able Iowa is produced by the Arc of Iowa, headquartered in West Des Moines, Iowa, with local chapters here in Ames and across the state of Iowa. Thank you for listening, and until next time, this is Nancy Baker Curtis and Zach Meekum saying, "You are able, Iowa."